My breath.
Okay. Tell me about the show early at Hangers.
Well, as I said, we were on from 9:15 to 9:45. Clint would be on the air till 9 o'clock on his show at the Hotel Statler where the studios were. And then he would stop at the florist shop and bring a dozen roses or whatever, walk over to Hangers. He'd get there just minutes before we were on the air. And then we had about, 60, 65 ladies in the tea room. We did our show from Vincent's Tea Room in the Hanger Company. And we would say, are you having any fun? They'd go, yes, sir. What you getting out of living? Fun. What good is what you've got if you're not having any fun? And then Clint would interview these ladies, and we would get four ladies up, and we'd have little stunts like who can scream the longest without taking a breath contest. And then I'd play boom, 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 and then they'd go, ah! Corny stuff, but fun. And then would award the flowers that Clint would have brought over to maybe the youngest grandmother in the audience, or the lady who traveled the farthest. Or one day we offered the flowers to the lady with the heaviest handbag, if we could go through the handbag and declare the contents. Well, the handbags would come up, they'd weigh 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds. Oh, here's one, 2.25. One lady came up, handbag, 6.5 pounds. What in the world? Can we go through the bag? Yeah, we went through the bag. And there was a flat iron in the bag. Now, she didn't know that the stunt was going to be on. She was a traveling lady. She used to sell merchandise to the Hanger Company, but she carried a flat iron to iron out her dresses or whatever when she was on the road. But something was wrong with it, and she happened to bring it in to have it fixed. And she won the flowers for that day. Everybody screamed laughing. You know, when you open a lady's purse, you can find lipstick and whatever, but a flat iron, well, it wasn't contrived. Anyway, we just had a show, and I'd play songs. Every one of these songs is going to have a part of the body. Name the part of the body. And I'd play Farewell to Arms or Hands Across the Table or Your Eyes Have Told Me So or whatever. And then, this is a cute gag that we used to do. Stump Bob Smith. They would have to mention a song, if they could, any song that was popular in the last 15 years. And if I couldn't play it, they'd get a silver dollar. And I could play nearly every song that was ever written. I had a pretty good ear. And then if I played it, I did, and if I couldn't, they'd get the silver dollar. That was one of our stunts. And then, this was a good one. We had a big map of the city of Buffalo and its environs, suburbs. So we'd draw the lucky number out, and the lady would come up, and where do you live? Oh, I live on 602 Hurdle. Well, we'd find that on the map. And wherever that was, we'd put a little red piece of blotter paper about this big where she lived. And then we had a dart throwing contest. We'd give her 2 practice darts. And if she hit the red piece of paper, she would get the jackpot of prizes. And if she didn't, well, the prize for that day would go into the jackpot. Well, I think we went something like 95 days without anybody hitting the thing. And the prizes that she got, this lady, was unbelievable. Oh, box springs and mattresses and beds. And it was just, we had the greatest publicity on that of anything we've ever done. Well, because we had such a great show and rating, and outrated the Breakfast Club, NBC, see, we were an NBC affiliate. NBC had their liaison men come to Buffalo and find out what these guys are doing to get the rating away from Don McNeil. Well, they thought our show was strictly a local show with the dart and whatever. And the fact that we'd have the Lackawanna Ladies Auxiliary, the fire department there one day, it would have the Blaisdell mother and daughter group or whatever. It was purely a local show. But they were, I also did an afternoon show where I played the piano and sang and did tricks with records. I'd play in the same key the record is playing in, and the engineer would have the vocalist, Dinah Shore, whoever, spotted right at the vocal, and I'd play Buttons and Bows in the key of C, which she was singing in. And I'd say, come on, Dinah, you do it. And I'd hit a nice G bell note, and Dinah would come right in and say, East is east and west. And it sounded like she was right in the studio.
What was the name of that show?
That was a Bob Smith show. And this liaison man from NBC heard my afternoon show. So he taped an hour of the show without my knowing. Not taped. They didn't have tape back then. 1946. They took an acetate, a 16-inch disc, 33 and a third RPM. Taped the show, took it to New York, and New York was looking for an early morning radio man personality. This is NBC now, the biggest station in the country, WNBC. Arthur Godfrey was on CBS. John Gambling was on WOR. And NBC had a hodgepodge. They had 15 minutes from Chicago and 30 minutes from Washington. And see, morning radio is habit. You listen to this, usually listen to the same people in the morning, same personality. You have coffee and juice and rolls and Billman or Smith or Godfrey or whoever. It's like a member of the family, usually. It was back then. They didn't have television, but it was back then. So they wanted a personality, because NBC was bad ratings in the morning. They had nothing. So they hired me out of the whole country, which was very flattering. So in 1946, they invited us to come to New York. And I did the early morning radio show starting August 5th, 1946. And I was on first from 7 to 8:30, then 6:30 to 8:30, and then 6 to 8:30, and then 6 to 9. And I wound up being on 6 to 9 every morning, Monday through Saturday. And I was making a ton of money. I can't tell you, because I not only got a handsome salary, but I also got a commission on the sales, on the commercials that I carried. And I was solidly sold out.
This is a huge break for you.
It was tremendous. It was just something that I never dreamed of. And then, of course, in March 1947 came Howdy Doody, and I guess then the rest was really history.
So you left again and you lived in New York City, assuming.
Lived in New Rochelle, New York, in Westchester County.
So you arrived in New York in 46, and how long did you host the show for?
That show, I did until my heart attack in 1954.
Wow.
But the thing, you see, the reason I got the heart attack, I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning, going into New York, on the air 6 to 9, working in my office, starting Howdy Doody rehearsal at noon. Howdy was on the air 5:30 to 6. Got home at about 7:30 at night. And you can't do that very often for too long, which I found out the hard way.
And didn't you also create and host a show called the Triple B Ranch?
Well, that's the show in which Howdy Doody was born.
Tell me about that.
Well, the boys at WNBC, my boss said, Bob, he said, we're going to block out the entire Saturday morning radio schedule for kids. Paul Winchell and Jerry Mahoney are going to do a half hour. Ed Hurley is going to do a half hour. And we want you to do a half hour. So I got together with my writers, and we came up with the fact that we would call our show the Triple B Ranch. And the 3 B's stood for Big Brother Bob. And it was a quiz show. We would have 4 kids from one school vying against 4 kids from another school. These are kids, 8 to 11 years old. And they'd be on a wooden horse. We had a wooden horse that had 4 seats on it. And there'd be 4 kids from here and 4 kids from here. I'd give the questions, and if they got the answers correct, they'd stay on the horse. If they didn't, they were knocked off, like in a rodeo. And the last one up, of course, would be the winner. And we had cute questions, not how much is 8 times 7, but cute, little cute questions. Anyway, the writer said one day, Bob, we need some comedy on the show. He said, now the whole show has a Western flavor, and do you have any voices or characters that we could use? So he went into the control room, and I did several characters, and he sort of liked this country bumpkin Mortimer Snurdish type voice that I did. So we'd call him Elmer. And I'd say, oh, wait a minute, kids, here comes Elmer. Hi, Elmer. And Elmer would come in and say, oh, well, howdy doody. Oh. And then we did some real corny hee-haw type jokes. And then would always wind up, I'd say, well, so long, Elmer. And he'd say, well, howdy doody. Well, now, this is radio. And we had what they called a limited budget. Did you ever hear of a limited budget?
Heard of it.
You have? Oh. We were so limited that we didn't have a dummy or a puppet or anything. I just talked to myself. And the kids would come in and they'd see the show and they'd root for their buddies up there on the horses. And invariably,
So it was a live audience.
oh yeah, we did it from a big studio at NBC. Yeah, we had about 300-400 kids in the audience rooting for their schoolmates.
And I might have missed it, but was it a weekly show?
It's on Saturday morning from 9 to 12.
9 to 12.
Well, the whole program, the whole Saturday morning schedule was from 9 to 12. We did 10 to 10:30. And the kids would come in, and invariably after the show, they'd come up and they'd say, oh, gee, Mr. Smith, we're so sorry. We wanted to see Howdy Doody. So see Howdy Doody. See, we were calling him Elmer. And they gave us two ideas. We won't call him Elmer anymore. Howdy Doody is a cuter name. And if the kids want to see him, let's talk to the television people, which we did. And they watched our show they watched 2 weeks of our show, and they said, hey, this fits in line with what we were going to do. We needed a kids show on television. We thought puppets would be a good idea. Matter of fact, we have a puppeteer already hired, and we can make another puppet. We'll call him Howdy Doody. And you can host the whole thing. We got some old-time silent films. You can host, you can narrate them. We'll have some kids on. We'll have some stunts with them. And that's how the whole Howdy Doody story happened. That's the beginning.
I want to stop you there. And well, first of all, when was the first time you saw television?
Well, right after we came to New York.
What was your impression of this?
Came to New York in 1946. Worked for NBC, owned by RCA. RCA was the biggest maker of television. And the boss made sure that we had a television right away, little 7-inch table model television set, and we loved it. Our kids were 5 and 6 at the time, and Mill and I would, my gosh, I couldn't wait to get home to watch whatever television there was that night. But there wasn't television every night. I mean, there was no daytime television. And
what shows would you watch?
well, there'd be Hopalong Cassidy, William Boyd and Gabby Hayes. Friday nights, there were fights from Madison Square Garden. When the circus had come to town, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey would be on from Madison Square Garden. Rodeos, dog shows. They had cameras all the time at Madison Square Garden. We did so many shows, saw so many shows from there. And then later there were, there were a few talk shows, like Author Meets the Critic was one, where somebody'd have a book and then they'd review the book. There's a show called Americana, where these smart little whiz kids would be on and answer questions. And but there's really nothing for kids.
So your family, you had the TV at home,
Mm-hmm.
and you would all crowd around this one small little
Sure
7-inch
did.
screen.
Yeah.
And how, if you could, how clear was it? Describe exactly what you saw when you were watching the show.
Well, they used to call it black and white, but it wasn't black and white. It was light gray and dark gray. The quality was bad, but it was a new thing, you know, and that was one of the things that really made Howdy so popular. See, we were the first show on every day in many markets for quite a few years. There was no daytime television. There was test pattern all day long. Test pattern so that when the person would buy a television set and the installers would come in, they'd have something to tune the set to. They needed a test pattern. So the kids would come home from school, sit in front of the television and listen to the recorded music and watch the test pattern till I got there in 5:30 and said, "Say, kids, what time is it?" And then the whole world blasted out Howdy Doody time. If they were watching television, they were watching Howdy Doody.
Describe for me when you first walked into a television studio. Describe what you saw and what your first impressions were.
Well, it was cables, 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 and cables. And hot. Oh, gosh, see, the cameras were so inferior back then. Though I think we had something like 1,400 foot candles of power, if that makes any sense to you. Terrible. When we first started, every day at about 4 o'clock, we would, because it was so hot, there was a lot of dust in the studio. And nearly all of us would have a headache by about 4 o'clock. We'd have to go up the infirmary and get chlortrimeton. That was the that was the drug we were taking to get rid of our headache. And then, of course, as the cameras progressed and got better, we had lesser lights. So that by 1956, we had just cool, just like wonderful cameras and cool, no sweat. But then we went into color. We started color on Labor Day of 1955, it was, 1955. We were the first show on in color every day. And then we're back to those hot lights because the color cameras were so bad. So we couldn't win. Then we had the terrible hot lights again. And then in 1960, by the time the cameras were wonderful and we could have cool lights, we went off the air. So we didn't win.
So when the first, let's talk about the first week preparing for your first show, on the air, and how much time did you have to prepare? And tell me about that whole.
No rehearsal, really, Michael. There was we talked over what we were going to do. I did see the movies. We were on a whole hour that first show. It was 5 to 6 on December 27, 1947. That was our first show. And we had about 12 kids in what was the clubhouse. It wasn't called the Peanut Gallery that early.
And the name of the show at this point was called?
Puppet Playhouse. But not Howdy Doody, just Puppet Playhouse. And I just...
Now, why not the Triple B Ranch?
Well, because we had so many puppets, and it was a completely different show from what we did on radio. The radio was strictly a quiz show, from 4 kids from one school against 4 kids from another school. Puppet Playhouse, because we hired this puppeteer who had many puppets. And one of his bits that he had was Toby in the Circus, where he had all these puppets. And they did about a 15-minute Toby in the Circus, which was like a serial. Then we also had old-time movies that I narrated. Would also have little stunts with the kids in the Peanut Gallery, in the clubhouse, excuse me. We didn't have a Peanut Gallery that early. And then an interesting thing is we learned on Tuesday, December 23rd, that we were going to be on television the following Saturday, December 27th. And then we got together and said, what are we going to do? Well, the boss said, no, we got to have Howdy on.
Now, who's the boss at this point? Who are the programmers?
Warren Wade was vice president in charge of television at the time. And Owen Davis Jr. Now, Owen Davis's father was a playwright. He was wrote great plays, Owen Davis. But his son, Owen Davis Jr., was like head of programming. And he said, we got to have Howdy Doody on. I said, well, we don't have a puppet. He said, oh, we got to have Howdy. What are we going to do? So we pretended for the first 3 weeks that Howdy Doody was in my desk drawer. And the camera had a shot on the desk drawer. And I'd say, are you in there, Howdy? And then the camera would, take the shot, and he'd say, oh, yeah, I'm in here, but I'm too bashful to come out. Well, he was too bashful to come out for 3 weeks until we made him.
So you would continue to do the voice for Howdy Doody?
Yep, I did the voice. And we were, as I said, he was too bashful for 3 weeks until we made him. Then the third week, we started with Howdy in the desk drawer, open it up, and that's the first time that people saw Howdy.
So I want to just finish up with this first show. When
All right.
you went on that Saturday, you were asked to start preparing on a Tuesday, and you were going on Saturday night.
Saturdays 5 to 6. We're on for a full hour.
For a full hour. Tell me about just a few minutes before you went on the air, first time.
Well, it was hectic because, see, we had nobody to learn anything from. I mean, we were like pioneers. We did have an act from Radio City Music Hall, the Godschmidt brothers. These were 2 fellas that had a great act with French poodles. They were on. They had their thing all ready. The Toby in the Circus was about the 15-minute serial thing that I told you about. The cameras, they just knew where the puppets would come in from. Did a little talk through. We just talked through things, walked through things. You couldn't have a dress rehearsal. We didn't have time. They only had one crew, and it was very, very primitive. I'd say, hey, I need that. Bring that thing over, will you, please? Somebody come on camera with it. It was primitive. It was interesting though.
How many cameras did you have? You remember?
3, always 3. Yeah.
And how would you know what camera to look into?
Well, the red light would be on.
The red light. So they had a red light.
Yeah.
And there would be a floor manager there pointing and giving you
Over
cues.
here, over there. Yeah. The camera number 1 was in the middle, always on a dolly, and the guy working the dolly, guy back pushing the dolly in and out. They'd say dolly in on Buffalo Bob's package of Welch's grape juice or whatever, and then he would run the dolly, and then the camera number 1 would sit on a stool. He sat on a stool, a swinging stool, and he'd work the camera. Camera 2 and camera 3 were pedestals, on pedestals. And they didn't have a zoom-in lens as we have. See, you only have 1 lens on the camera today. We had 4, called turret. You'd have a 135 up here, and you'd switch it to a 90, and you'd switch it to a close-up and a wide-angle lens. And when they were on camera 1 that I'd look into, then they'd want camera 2 over here to go to a 135 for a close-up of something. Then the TD, the director in the control room, would say, camera 2, go to a 135, and he'd be switching lenses while I was on number 1, and then there'd be this. Or they'd say, camera 1, dolly in on Buffalo Bob. And then the guy would push the dolly, all earphones, of course, so that they'd be in contact with the control room. And then they'd push the camera in. Sometimes they'd be within this far of my face. It was very, very primitive. See, today you have... I did a show on QVC, Quality Value Channel. They have the most interesting setup that I've ever seen. They have a circular stage. In the circular stage, there are 4 sets. There's a set here, and a set there, and a set there, and a set there. And when they finish with this show, they can have the next set ready. They'll just revolve the stage, and the cameras never move. They have no cameramen. There's a camera here, and a camera there, and a camera there. And they're all controlled from the control room. They dolly in, they dolly out, they go to the right, they go to the left. The girl is just moving those cameras to take a picture of whatever they want on the set. It's an unbelievable experience when you think of the primitive way that we did the shows. Very interesting.
So, going back to December 27th, just describe, I want to get a good sense of what it was like. Just a few moments before, the atmosphere, were people running around before you went on the
like crazy?
Like crazy? I mean, describe, just walk us through this first couple of moments.
Well, it was tense for a while. You're nervous before the show. But it seems like as soon as you're on, you're no longer nervous. I don't know why. It's like a baseball player. They say that, well, I played in games where I was nervous until I walk out to the mound and warm up. But as soon as you throw the first pitch, you're no longer nervous. Well, you know that, don't you, from your years in television, whatever. You're nervous but when you get on, you're just like you're sitting home having a drink with your wife before dinner. Ovaltine or Welch's grape juice.
Well, that's actually a good question. Did you have a sponsor at the first?
Oh, no, we were not. No, we did not have a sponsor for the first. Well, I'm going to say we didn't have a sponsor for the first 3 months. We started just Saturday afternoons from 5 to 6 for 3 weeks. Then we added Tuesdays, and then we added Thursdays. And we were on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 5 to 6. And then that became very confusing for the kids. How do you do the on today, Mommy? No, today's Wednesday. Well, let's not be on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from 5 to 6. Let's be on Monday through Friday from 5:30 to 6:30. So then we went 5:30 to 6, Monday through Friday. Now, this was 1948, maybe March or possibly April.
Okay, I want to get there in a second, but I want to just finish up with the first show.
All right.
Was on this first show, December 27th, 47.
Yeah.
It's Howdy Doody Time. Was that played the first show?
Yeah, we sang It's Howdy Doody Time. See, there was no live music allowed on television back then. Petrillo had not signed any live music. All music was recorded, or you could play ukulele. Ukulele was not called an instrument. So I would sing, "It's Howdy Doody Time, it's Howdy Doody Time, Bob Smith and Howdy too, say howdy doody you. Let's give a rousing cheer, 'cause howdy doody here, it's time to start the show. So kids, let's go. Frank Paris and his puppets three, and I would billboard the show with the Tarara Boom Die, 'cause that's in public domain, so you could write your own lyrics to it. But they didn't call it Howdy Doody Time. They didn't call it the Howdy Doody Show for maybe 5 or 6 months.
Explain why live music wasn't allowed then.
Because Petrillo, who was the head of the musicians' local union for the whole United States, had not signed an agreement with the networks
For television.
for television. What this
Obviously, he had for radio.
for radio, that's right, but not scale. Scale was not established. So live music was not allowed back then. Studio One was a big show that was on CBS every Monday night, I believe, from 9 to 10 or 10 to 11. And they did wonderful dramatic shows, but it was all with recorded background. Of course, there was so much recorded music, that wasn't very difficult. But you couldn't have any bands on, nothing live. You couldn't play the piano. And then we were the first show, well, Petrillo first, when he signed the agreement with the networks, he was the first one that played, and he blew his trumpet. I think he blew 5 or 6 notes, and he was the first one to have ever played. But we were the first show to have had live music, because we had live music on the next day. And we had a great, great group on the Howdy Show. We had Tony Mottola playing guitar. And
who later did Danger, right?
Oh, sure.
He did a whole bunch of-
Tony was the best. I played piano, of course, and Tony was on, and we had just a great. We had Doc Whipple, our great organist, who played background music for the silent films, the old-time movies. But what I was, yeah, unless you have another question you wanted to hit me
Well,
about.
I wanted to talk to you, ask you about Roger Muir. Tell me about him.
All right. Well, Roger was our producer. Fred Cole, who was the top producer at NBC, was supposed to have done our very first show. And I met with Fred, and he was, yes, all set. And then I got a message from Warren Wade, I believe, on the day before, on Friday, that Fred Coe was called out of town on a remote that he had to do someplace. And then Roger Muir, who was another one of the producers at NBC, I met the day before, and then we worked and discussed what we were going to do on our first show with the following day. So I didn't have much of a chance to speak with Roger about it. We just went in there and winged it. I said, "You do what you want to do, and I'll follow you. I'll keep one camera on you, and we'll burn incense at both ends of the studio and pray that we get through this thing."
Did Roger stay on with the show?
Oh, yeah, Roger was our producer all the while we were on, all 2,543 shows.
So 3 weeks later, you actually the Howdy Doody appeared. Right?
Yeah.
For the first time. Who created the puppet for the first time?
Pardon me. Our first puppet was made by Frank Paris. Frank Paris was our first puppeteer, who had Toby in the Circus and a lot of other puppets. And he made this grotesque Howdy Doody, just not a good puppet.
How do you mean?
Well, I have a picture of it. I'll get it for you. It just wasn't a good-looking puppet. It was we thought it was all right at the time, but then Macy's the toy buyer came to our show one day and said that, "Have you ever thought of licensing Howdy Doody? I mean, we have requests for the Howdy Doody dolls." So Frank Paris got wind of this and thought that he should figure in the royalties that would be coming from the licensing. Well, NBC had paid him $500 to make the puppet, which was a lot of money back then. So the deal was closed. And NBC said, "No, you don't have any rights to the licensing. It's Buffalo Bob's name. It's Buffalo Bob's idea. It's Buffalo Bob's everything. No, we own the puppet. We, NBC, own the puppet, and Bob owns the name. And you were paid for the puppet. It's ours." And he said, "Well, if you think it's yours, I'll just take my puppet and go home." And he did. He walked out of the studio in about 12:30 one
You
day,
brought the puppet.
and took the puppet.
Now, when was this? What year?
This was probably March, April
Of 48?
of '48.